One of the great joys of doing the symposium is I'm home and I get to invite all my great friends to come. And Allan and I have known each other for years and have become closest of friends, and he's been a real inspiration in my life, in all levels. So it's just a real treat to have Allan here, so please make me feel at home. Allan McMurray.
It's great to be here. You had a couple of exciting days? Mm-hmm. Good. Frank to Kelly? Devin will autograph all your scores? Yeah, of course. First of all, it's just great to be here, and it's an honor to be invited. This workshop symposium the University of Minnesota does is so important to the profession in so many ways, and they put it together, I think, just with such great imagination and with such attention to the artistic growth of every participant, that I can't think of a better place for you to spend your time than here with the family that's at the University of Minnesota. And I've got students who are going to be coming out here too. In fact, we've got an oboe player that's going to be coming out here, Lindsay, who is so excited to come out and be a graduate student here with you. Great. And it's great to see Liz too. I was in their wedding party, Craig and Liz. And we were just talking about that. We'll tell you more stories about that later. Yeah. Or whatever, yeah. Maybe, yeah.
Well, when Dick is here.
Yeah, when Dick's here, right. Yeah, right. But at any rate, friendship is great. And friendship is something that isn't forced upon you. Friendship is something you get to choose. And you invest in friends. And what are some of the ways that you make friends? What do you have to do to make a friend? Anybody?
Time.
You have to spend time with them, absolutely. What else?
Trust.
You have to trust them. Yeah, and you kind of build that trust up over time, don't you? Because you don't trust everybody kind of the first time you meet them.
Communicate.
What?
Communicate.
You have to communicate, yeah, and that means you've got to not only have something to say, but you've got to be able to listen and hear what they're telling you. What else? Yeah, you know, I think there is something. I mean, you don't seek out somebody who's a drug addict to be your best friend. You know, I mean, there may be people who have problems and you try to help them out of it, but you look for somebody who's an inspiration to be around, I think, a lot of times, and hopefully you're an inspiration for them as well. What else?
Vulnerability.
Vulnerability. Yeah, that's part of that trust issue, isn't it? Because once you trust someone, you're willing to tell them your deep, dark secrets, and we kind of depend upon our friends that we can share those things with. We have a time that we get together in Chicago. Do you call that the tree house, Liz?
I call it Boys Night Out.
Boys Night Out, yeah. But there's a group of us that get together at Midwest in Chicago each year, and I can't tell you how much I look forward to that. I don't know if I would even go to Midwest anymore if it wasn't for that. Because the most important thing for me at Midwest is not the latest clinic on alternate fingerings, but it's really the opportunity to spend time with the people who have made such a difference in my life, and friends who really touch the inside of you, make a difference with you all the time. They're there, and you remember that collaboration. Sometimes it gives you courage. You know, there's somebody who I care so much about who actually values me as a friend, and that kind of gives me confidence in who I am and that I might be okay. And also, when you know that you're going to see that person again, you know that you can, with a great friend, you know you can just resume where you left off. That you don't have to start the friendship over again. That you get to take what's been invested already and you get to build upon it the next time you're together. So that friendship is a really important thing. And because friendship is so important to me, and because I think it's such an important part of our life, it occurred to me when I was asked to do a session at the Oklahoma Music Educators Convention that would help people deal with score preparation, that I was thinking about the fact that many times I carry around with me kind of friends. These are scores that I care about. These are pieces of music that I love. These are things that I'm learning about. And so I came up with this, which is the title of this session today, which is "The Score is Your Friend." And the idea of this is that score analysis is really the wrong term. You know, it's kind of analysis. As soon as you use the word analysis, You know, I don't know that I want to be friends with someone who's going to analyze me or who wants me to analyze them. I think shared values, shared ideas, shared passion, yeah, but don't analyze me. Just be my friend. Bob Reynolds carries around something in his wallet. You remember? I can't remember exactly. A friend is not one who is given in by sham. A friend is one who knows your faults and doesn't give a damn. And so I decided that for me, and for the way that I want to deal with this really important part of my life, which is the time that I spend with scores, that I wanted to treat it like investing in a friendship. And that means that, like you said, you want to choose who you're going to spend time with. I don't want to spend time with a scorer that's got an addiction problem, where it keeps doing the same thing over and over again in mistake, or that it's part of a series of things that have had the same thing over and over again. I'm looking for an opportunity to share something. Albert Einstein said the most beautiful thing we can experience is the mysterious. It is the true source of art, science, and friendship. There's a mysterious thing about friendship. I mean, when you first meet somebody and you think, there's something about this person I really like. I'd like to get to know them better. And so you ask them questions. And sometimes, you know, as you're dealing with a piece of music, you're doing that. But the first thing we have to do is decide how we're going to choose a piece of music. Because Cervantes said, "Tell me what company thou keepest, and I'll tell thee what thou art." Tell me what music you conduct, and I'll tell you about your musicianship. And that doesn't mean that if you don't conduct Mahler's Ninth, you're not a great musician, or if you conduct Rest, you're not a good musician. I mean, Rest gives you the opportunity for great music making, and you can put a bad conductor in front of Mahler's Ninth, and it's still going to be bad conducting. So the music itself, but the music does kind of play a part of that. And certainly our selection of music is like our selection of who we're going to be friends with and who we want to spend time with. We need to choose carefully. And certainly for our students, if we're going to take somebody into the classroom and say, this is my friend, this is somebody who I believe in, this is somebody who I respect, we want them to not only know that it's somebody that they can trust, and somebody that they can learn from, and somebody that they can grow from, but we also want to know that we share with them our values of what we believe good friends are, and what we believe the kind of people that you should spend time with. I think one of the things that I usually deal with a lecture at the University of Colorado in the early part of the semester. We have a freshman orientation, and I'm one of the people that they ask to come in and speak. And one of the things that I always say to freshmen is, I know that there are some people at this university that you know, but there are a lot fewer people that you know here than you knew in high school. And so you have an opportunity right now, and that opportunity is going to be to make new friendships. And let me talk to you about some opportunities you have in terms of the friends that you choose. Now, you can go back to the dorms and you can choose those people who party all the time, who do video games, who try to tell you that you don't need to practice or don't need to study because you're in college to have a good time. And those can be your friends for a year, but they probably won't be your friend for longer than a year because they won't make it the second year, and neither will you. Or you can choose people who you look at and say, boy, I admire that person. This person is, doing things that I hope I'll be able to do sometime. You can look at an upperclassman and say, boy, this person's just a wonderful, wonderful person. They seem to really have it together. I think I'd like to get to know this person. And a lot of their success, I think, as a freshman, has to do with who they decide to align themselves with. And certainly in the College of Music at Colorado, we spend time trying to get students together with students in studios, and the faculty do things for, to build that kind of camaraderie and chamber music opportunities and all those kinds of things, because how they spend their time is going to have such an important part on their success at the university. And how our students spend their time in rehearsal is important too, and we want to make sure that we put good things in front of them. So, as we're developing a friendship with a score, what are some of the things that we need to deal with? Well, first of all, if we know that that other people who we respect have made friends with this person, that might say, well, you know, this person might be a person who's worthy of friendship, who we want to invest time in, who we want to get to know better. If you see that somebody like Craig is good friends with Frank Tikeli, and then that might be a good endorsement. Or maybe Frank's good friends with a composer you don't know, but you think, well, gee, Frank's, was a really good person, and now Craig's friends with this person. Maybe this is a person worth me knowing about as well. So sometimes it's that trust issue with people that we know, and we get acquainted with another composer that way. Sometimes it could be based upon reputation or hearing something about them, but you got to be careful, because not everybody who has a big reputation is somebody who always makes a great friend. We had the opportunity to have John Curigliano pass through our campus, and it was at a really important time in his life. He had won a Pulitzer Prize for his second symphony that he'd done with the Chicago Symphony Orchestra, and Barenboim had conducted that, and then that performance that they recorded won a Grammy. And then he was out in LA picking up an Oscar for his score to the Red Violin. I mean, how's that for the trifecta? I mean, it's a pretty amazing thing in anybody's life, but for Curigliano, that was just an extraordinary time for him as a composer. And so on his way back from LA, on his way back to New York, he stopped in Colorado, and we had him do some lectures. And I went to a lecture that he was involved in, and because I knew he was going to be there, and because I knew about the symphony, I got a score to it, and I listened to the recording of the Chicago Symphony, and I had score there. And one of the things that struck me when I was dealing with the score was the fact that there were so many things that were in the recording that were different from the score. And so my natural thought was, gee, this is really interesting. I wonder if the composer was kind of changing things, because once you write a piece, and once you hear it many times, it's still a work in progress. And, well, let's do this a little bit different, or let's try that, or let's try this. Or I wondered if maybe Barenboim had gone to Curigliano and said, this is great, but how would you feel, if we did this here instead? Maybe this tempo, So I was really interested in all that. And so during this time where there was this question and answer period with our students, there was a lull. And it was just long enough for me to feel like I could ask a question without taking any time away from the students. So I raised my hand, and I said, Mr. Curigliano, I really have interest in the score. And I was listening to the recording of the Chicago Symphony, and I was looking at the score, and I noticed that there were some differences. And I wondered if maybe you could talk to us about that relationship between you and a new piece, and the conductor and an ensemble, and how that evolution takes place to produce what seems to be some differences between what you initially wrote and what was on the recording. And there was a pause. And he looked up and he said, the orchestra wasn't prepared, and Barenboim didn't know the score. They won a Grammy!
Oh my God.
How many people are preparing that piece based upon that recording? With wrong tempi? Wrong dynamics? How many people are going in and saying, boy, I've got the Chicago Symphony recording and it won a Grammy, and we're going to play it just like that. It's going to be great. So somewhere in there needs to be some honesty, because we said that part of what you deal with friendship is being honest with them and being vulnerable with them, and not just taking someone else's word for it. You've got to establish that relationship. Every score that you deal with, you have to establish a relationship with. You have to know it. You have to create a friendship with it. You can't depend upon somebody else's purported friendship. Bob Reynolds is a friend of mine. And when I first went to the University of Colorado, there was a high school director in the state who was trying to impress me, didn't know that Bob Reynolds was a friend of mine. And so he came up to me, and he'd just taken his band to the Rose Bowl. And he said, I took my band to the Rose Bowl. I said, great. I said, I bet they had a great time. Yeah, it was wonderful. And he said, I spent a lot of time with Bob Reynolds. He's a friend of mine. I said, really? He said, oh, yeah. He said, we were out there. And I thought, well, that's really interesting. And so that night I called Bob. Now, Bob's a person who, I did my undergraduate work with him. at Cal State Long Beach. I did master's work with him at the University of Wisconsin. He and I were colleagues together at the University of Michigan. He was best man at my wedding. I know Bob pretty well. So I called up Bob and we were talking about something else. I said, by the way, I said, I met a great friend of yours. And he said, well, who's that? And I told him the name of the person. He said, who? And I said, well, it's a director from Colorado. He said, oh, that guy. He said, that guy kept trying to come up, and I didn't know what he wanted, you know. But he was trying to purport that he was a friend of my friend. And not knowing how well, you know, I knew him. And it was a sham. It was a sham. He thought that he could elevate himself by pretending to be a friend. Kind of like you might elevate yourself by pretending that you know a score when you really don't. Or pretending that you're friends with a composer when you're really not. Because friendship's earned. It's earned by time spent, it's earned by investment, it's earned by listening, it's earned by sharing. So our time, if we know a score, it's like knowing a friend. We've spent time with them. And I think the beginning of your preparation has to be with the idea that you're going to establish a relationship with the score long before you ever step on the podium. And that means you carry the score around with you. And, you know, on my trip here, you know, I mean, I took a float plane. I'm on Vancouver Island right now because my wife and I have a summer home there. So, and I normally don't take things in July because it's just so hard to get any place. So my wife drove me down to a place called Nanaimo. Anybody ever heard of Nanaimo?
I'm Canadian.
Oh, you are?
Yeah.
Okay, well, we have a place in Comox, right on the water. You know, it's beautiful, and we love the ocean. Not that Colorado's so shabby in the summer, but, you know, it's not on the ocean. And so we got this place on the water, and so my wife drove me down. I caught a float plane. A float plane. How many of you have ever ridden on a float plane? Cool, you know what it's like. You know, and then got to Vancouver, you know, took the shuttle to the airport, checked in, then had to go through security, which because it's cruise ship season in Vancouver, forget it, man. It's like everybody in the... How many of you have ever been on an Alaskan cruise? Any of you ever been on an Alaskan cruise? Then the rest of you are the only people on the planet who have not yet been on an Alaskan cruise. Everyone else was in Vancouver while I was there. So I go through that line, then go through security, which same people, right? Security, and then go through customs, same people. So, you know, it's like an hour and a half to 2 hours to get through all that. But I got there really early. So then I've got time. I got like 2 hours. Scores. So I go, you sit down, you know, pull out my scores, and I start spending time with my friends, you know, to get to know them better. I'm asking them questions, I'm finding out a little bit more about it, I'm making marks, and then I have to pack up, so then I get in the plane. You know, got to put the stuff overhead, got to pull out some scores, put on the seat, sit down, scores. You know, you find time to spend, and if your friend was with you, what would you be doing? You'd say, well, come on, let's talk. But your friend isn't with you. But your friend is with you if it's a score. So there's lots. So for people who say, well, I never have time to do score study, they're thinking that, okay, I've got to be at a piano, I've got to, you know, it's got to be, it can be any time, just like having a friend with you. You know, having a cup of coffee with your score. So the first thing is you got to find time to do it. Then the second thing is you need to know the kinds of things that you want to find out about your friend. So I think there's some kind of prerequisite information that you need to have in order to know what questions to ask. Part of that prerequisite study is some things you've already done. You got a music degree. Part of that music degree was music history, performance practice, style. You took theory, and you learned how to access Groves, Harvard Dictionary. I mean, you know how to deal with resource materials. You had as part of your study familiarity with musical forms and compositional techniques, including harmony and melody and rhythm, orchestration, instrumentation, knowledge of all the transpositions and clefs. And maybe some of those things you were stronger in than other things. And the things you aren't stronger in, if you know that part of your friendship is going to be based upon being able to ask questions about these things, it'd be good for you to know something about it. You don't want to call Frank Kelly on the phone to ask him a question about a score you've never looked at. So Frank, I'm about to conduct rest. Tell me about the piece. And Frank said, well, what do you want to know? Well, you know, I haven't opened it up yet. Well, why don't you open it up and then call me back later? You know, I mean, it's like there has to be an investment on your part before you even know what questions to ask, right? So that investment is your preparation so that you got something to bring to the table to share with. If you're going to talk with somebody in German, you have to be able to speak German. you're going to talk to somebody in French, you need to be able to speak French. And if not, you need to have a dictionary there with you. So if I'm dealing with trying to make friends with Darius Milhaud, I've got a French dictionary with me. If I'm trying to make friends with Brahms, I've got a German dictionary with me. If I'm trying to make friends with Smetana, I'm trying to find anybody who's got a Czech dictionary. You know, I mean, it's and early Stravinsky. I mean, where you're dealing with Russian. I mean, so I've got all these. When I was young, I picked up at a used bookstore all these great Castle dictionaries, which I still prefer using as opposed to going to Google, because you go to Google and you put in and it'll give you a translation. It'll give you one thing, but if you go to a dictionary, you'll get 17 different things, and from those you can kind of develop a point of view about translation. You need to have oral skills. And those oral skills are really, really, really important if you want the score to be your friend, because you can't take a piano with you on the airplane. So you've got to have some way to be able to hear what it is that the composer wrote. And so if this is not a strong point for you, if like dictation or you can't sight sing, that's something to work on, because it's going to help your friendship. It's going to help that the time you spend is going to be better time, because you're going to be able to look at a major chord and hear it, or look at a diminished chord and hear it. You're going to be able to look at a suspension and hear it. You're going to be able to sing a line to yourself and hear that relationship. So it's something to keep working on. And just like you're here to learn, you're spending time this summer to do it, you can spend time to work on whatever you want to work on, if it's important to you, if that friendship's important to you. If you had a friend who you really wanted to spend time with, and that friend was somebody who was into rollerblading, okay? You might buy some rollerblades so that you could spend more time with your friend. And your friend would be really pleased that you did that you cared so much about them, that you brought those too, so that you could do the same thing, right? Rollerblade, or, you know, skateboarding, or whatever it is. If you do something because your friend's got it, and you do it because you want to spend time with your friend, that's an investment in that friendship too, isn't it? Your friend likes to do something, and then maybe there's something that you like to do. Maybe you like to go canoeing, and your friend said, you know, I've never been canoeing. Oh, why don't you come along? Let's do it together. And in that fact that each of you is vulnerable with the other person providing leadership, it's really important. So that's important in the score too. The composers have interest in certain things that you need to have interest in. I think it's important to listen to live performances and recordings of great artist performers in all venues, on all instruments and voices. And I think listening to band music less and listening to music that isn't band music more, in this respect of growing as an artist. Because when we listen to a recording of a great middle school band, we're thinking, man, that's a great middle school band. We're not thinking, isn't that a beautiful phrase? Maybe we are, but usually you can't get past the fact that, boy, those kids are so young and they're doing so well. I mean, we start thinking about the process rather than just thinking about the beauty of art. But you go and you listen to Jesse Norman singing the last songs, and you're not thinking, boy, I'm amazed with the speed of her vibrato there. I mean, you're thinking more about just the beauty of the phrase. And so you can just give yourself to the music. You can just give yourself to the art that we're trying to be a part of, and let it fill you with possibilities. And those possibilities become part of what you bring to your friendship. Because composers listen to music, and composers study music, and that becomes part of their DNA when they write the notes on the page, isn't it? And who they studied with might be part of their DNA about, you know, what they write on the page. And your DNA is all the musical experiences you have. So that's what you bring to the friendship. You bring the instrument that you studied. You bring the voice. You bring the music that you've conducted, the books you've read, the people you've known. You bring everything that you are to that relationship, and that's part of who you are that you bring to the friendship with the composer as well. The achievement of a high artistic level as a performer on a solo instrument or voice is really important. And for our music education students at Colorado, well, I'm a big advocate in all faculty meetings and everything about the importance of that. We really believe in that at Colorado, and I know they do at Minnesota as well. And all of our students get full-hour lessons with our primary faculty. They all give recitals. And they do that not because we think that they're going to go out and have a career as a performer if they're in music education. It's because we want them to have experienced a high artistic level on their solo instrument or voice so that they've got something to bring to the table. Because of this, there is kind of a depth chart in the world. Depth. Okay. There's you. There's the music And all of these are somewhere. Let's say that your ensemble on the depth chart being, this is, I don't know anything about music, to this is the world's greatest musician. They're somewhere here, right? Maybe they're here. Fair enough? And maybe there's a piece of music you're dealing with that is playable by them, but if they can get it, there's going to be more to it than that. So let's say that you take Frank DeKelly's Rest, a wonderful piece of music that's going to be within their wheelhouse, but still, there's more for them to go to. And your preparation and your musicianship, with this being novice and this being the world's greatest musician, you're somewhere here. This all works great. It works great for a couple of reasons. First of all, you can really get inside this piece of music. You can really help your ensemble grow because of the depth of the music you're exposing it to and because of your depth, right? This is a combination that's successful. But let's change the equation a little bit. Let's assume that you're there, and for some reason, you were asked to conduct Mahler's Ninth with the Chicago Symphony. You're in big trouble. Why are you in big trouble?
The ensemble may exceed your ability to have enough knowledge to...
They might know more about the music than you do. And you're on the podium. Whoa. Talk about nightmares, recurring dreams, you know. Okay. Plus the music itself, what a responsibility. And for these people to have a great experience with this music, how are you going to do that? Now, on the other hand, if you are here, and you're conducting Happy Birthday, what are you going to be able to bring to that piece of music? Let me ask you this. If Yo-Yo Ma was in your neighborhood and somebody called you and said, you know, he's really interested in visiting a school music classroom, would it be okay with you if Yo-Yo Ma came by and met your students? No way. Are you kidding me? You know, he's a cellist. What's that got to do with band? Right? Come on. Now, when you get a saxophone player, let me know. Okay, so you say, of course. My God, I'd love to have Yo-Yo Ma in. And so it doesn't matter what we were planned, you know, cancel it. Today, Yo-Yo Ma, right? I mean, and the word's out, and the kids are excited. They know that Yo-Yo Ma's going to be there. And Yo-Yo Ma comes in, and Yo-Yo Ma finds out that one of the kids in the ensemble is having a birthday. So Yo-Yo Ma, for this kid, plays Happy Birthday. What's that going to sound like? Is it going to sound like we all just sang it, Happy Birthday? Probably not. Yo-Yo Ma's going to go, and man, Happy Birthday is going to be like you've never heard it before. Because Yo-Yo Ma is going to bring the depth of his musicianship to this piece of music and somehow make that piece of music even better. He's going to find a way to create an extraordinary performance out of an average piece of music because of the depth of his musicianship, isn't he? He's not going to take his musicianship and put it at the level of Happy Birthday. He's going to do this. And if your kids are... What did I do with mine? There it is. And if your kids are here experiencing this way, what are they going to learn? They're going to learn about what's possible. Doesn't change Happy Birthday, although it does. But what experience do your kids have as a result of that? Do you think that's something that you could teach them about or that they could learn from? Would that be a worthwhile experience? Great. Then why aren't you doing that? Because you may not be able to always control every moment of how deep the ensemble gets. And because of the limitations of the ensemble, you can't do Mahler's Ninth. right? But what you can do is you can make your personal journey be one that consistently contributes to a deeper understanding of everything that you do. It's going to change the way that you conduct. It's going to change the way that you do that. And part of that experience that you have that's depth is studying great music and listening to great artists. That's part of what it does. So that growth as a musician is really, really, really important, and it helps you ask questions of every score. You ask a different question of rest if you're Simon Rattle than you do if you just finished your undergraduate degree in music. And it's not because you're trying less or you care less. It's just you know less. Can't help that. But maybe the next time you'll know more. And that's okay. It's because you're on a journey. And I'll talk more about that later in another session. So what are the goals of score study for the artist teacher? I love this quote. When we seek to discover the best in others, we somehow bring out the best in ourselves. I think we look at a score as if it has something to tell us. We've taken the time to make a decision about it, and now we're going to discover the composer's intent. And we're going to assume that the composer has an intent. Because we've taken some time to try to decide who it is that we're going to make friends with. And part of that intent might be revealed in program notes. Frank Tikeli does a great job in that in the publications. I mean, I really put Bob Margolis up for the fact that he gives space in the score for Frank to be able to include information about the score in ways a lot of publishers don't do. So despite the fact that he charges more money for his stuff and that it's printed on archive paper, I think that's a real service. And Frank does a great job of communicating to us what it is that inspired him to write the music. And he thinks that's important that you know that. Why does he think that's important that you know that?
So that we get an understanding of what we're supposed to play.
Yeah, he wants you to understand the music. But he wants you to understand that the music is not just notes and dynamics, that it's trying to express something. And our goal, I feel, standing in front of the ensemble, is to not use the notes as what we teach, but use the inspiration as what we teach and help the students find it through what they have on their page. Our goal is to unite the students with the composer's intent. Music's just like a foreign language. And if you were going to go to Spain, and you knew that you were going to spend time there, and let's say that you were going to rehearse an ensemble, you've been invited to conduct a band in Spain, and they only spoke Spanish. What would you feel that you'd need to be able to do in order to communicate? Speak Spanish. Well, okay, you want to know as much as possible, and obviously that's going to be an ongoing task. But let's say that it was going to be this fall. So you start learning Spanish, and particularly you're going to learn what? You're going to learn things that are going to be related to what you're going to try to communicate. So if you know that you're conducting a certain piece of music, you're going to go through and you're going to try to find ways to communicate to the people in Spain what it is that you're trying to get. So you're going to be thinking about the music, and you're going to be thinking about, well, how am I going to tell them what it is that we need to do there? It's not just louder, softer. I want them to understand what the inspiration, the composer's intent is. So you're trying to think of ways to say that, and then you look up the vocabulary and you write it in, or you put it on a post-it notes, and it's in your score, right, with the pronunciation under it. You also might want to learn to say, like, where's the bathroom? 2 bars before letter A. I mean, there are other things that are important to kind of learn how to say, but your intent is to somehow get them connected with the music and get connected with the spirit of the music, because they can read the notes, but that's not going to be enough in terms of your communication, is it? There's going to have to be something else besides the dynamics, besides loud, soft, besides short, long, besides A flat, A natural, besides crescendo, diminuendo, that you're going to want to communicate, and you're going to have to be able to say that. I think it's important in every piece of music that you look at it that way. What am I trying to communicate, and how am I going to communicate this? And that's part of the friendship that you're creating with the score. I think developing an oral concept of the work goes back to what I was saying about sight singing. And if you've got piano skills, that's great. But there's one thing about a piano. You know, how many of you are pianists in here? Anybody a pianist? I have to tell you that there are some great conductors who are pianists. And there are some great pianists who are conductors. And one of the things about a great pianist who chooses to be a conductor is that there's something missing in their music making. And that's the music between the notes. Because when I hear a great pianist create a crescendo, many times they create it by making the beginning of every successive note louder than the previous note, which is what you do on piano, because you can't create a crescendo between notes. So you're bum, bum, ding, dum, dum, because that's how a pianist does it. That's a little dee-da. You don't hear that. And you can hear that, and I can listen to a recording and I say, that's a pianist. Oh. You know, they're creating the crescendo like a pianist. I think your oral concept of the work many times has to be away from the instrument, because the instrument can influence. I think if you can't get an oral concept of the work at all, then the instrument's valuable. But if you can develop the ability to hear it and imagine anything that's possible that serves the composer's intent, you start to get an idea. And what I do is I go through absolutely every single part and sing it. I think it's also important, another goal of the score study is to empathize with the meaning of the music. You know, if somebody's written, when Frank DeKelly wrote An American Elegy, and I called him to write that piece, and that's a whole other story, but the Columbine High School band did the premiere of that. Nobody will ever play it like they did. They can't. They didn't have the experience. They may not have been the best players in the world, although there were some wonderful players in there, but they brought an understanding of that wasn't just empathizing it, they'd lived it. For those of us that didn't experience that personally, we can only empathize with what that might have been. But we can still empathize with it. And reading books and reading poetry and stimulating our imagination with thoughts and places that we've never been to are one of the ways that we develop the ability to empathize with a composer's intent. And if a composer is writing about something and it's based upon a poem, you need to read the poem. You need to reflect upon the poem. If it's based upon something about a character, I can't imagine doing Winds of Nagual without having read about that. There's something about what inspired the composer that you want to get at if you want to empathize with that inspiration. So we've got work to do, and that's part of asking the questions, building that friendship. One of my goals is to develop my interpretation. Now, what is my interpretation? Does that mean that, well, it says allegro, but I think it should go adagio? A lot of people develop their interpretation of the whole first suite. What is, don't say it right now, but raise your hand if you know the tempo marking at the beginning of the first movement of the whole first suite. Oh, you just did that. Huh? Yeah. All right. Yeah, but how many people would normally say andante? A lot of people think of it as and the tuba player's eyes are getting bigger and bigger. You know, where am I going to breathe? And allegro moderato is such a different tempo, right? And then, you know, is the vivace faster or slower than the last movement? And how fast is the vivace? And is that influenced by the listesso? And how does all that work? I mean, there are things that we're trying to deal with. And once we get inside of us what we feel that relationship is based upon our knowledge of the score, we develop our personal feeling about that and our personal point of view on that. Not to change what the music is, but to somehow bring it to life. Yo-Yo Ma's performance of Happy Birthday does not change the rhythm or the notes in Happy Birthday, but somehow brings the depth of Yo-Yo Ma's musicianship to that piece of music without changing it, but somehow enlivening it, and that's going to be different than other people's. If the piece of music is a donut, a plain donut, and it's dipped into Yo-Yo Ma, it comes out with maple on it. Okay? If it's dipped into Rostropovich, it comes out with powdered sugar on it. If it's dipped into Pablo Casals, it comes out with chocolate on it. It's still a donut. But the fact that that musician has been part of what's gone into the collaboration to make the music come to life, that musician's DNA has to be part of it. How can a musician's DNA not be part of it? Or should the piece sound without any musician on it at all? Should there be no musician on that? Should it just be a piece that exists in time? I've been involved, as Craig has, with many composers' forums. And one of the questions I love asking composers is this. And imagine that you're a composer. I ask you this question. In your ideal world, would all of the performances of your music sound the same? In other words, boy, if I had the best player on every instrument and they were all playing exactly the way I imagined it, could I have that performance every time? What do you think the answer is? No. All of them. I've never had a composer say yes, ever. I think not since Varese has there been a composer who would say yes. So the next question, of course, is a really interesting question. Great, what would be different? Oh, well, you know, the tempo might be a little bit, you know, well, you know, the hall might, you know, well, the sound, they don't know. They can conjecture. They say, well, you know, this. I mean, Frank Tekeli on his website has multiple recordings of his pieces posted. They sound different. Why would he do that? He does it because he doesn't want to say, this is the way it sounds. What's the danger in the recording? The danger is the Corigliano syndrome. This is the way it goes. This is posted on my website, therefore play it just like this, and you've done what I want you to do. You need to be the best musician you can be. And that means you need to have a point of view. And part of that point of view is developing over time. So when you conduct the Holst First Suite for the... Greg, how many times have you conducted the Holst First Suite? Yeah. I happen to know that Craig has conducted the Holst First Suite 147,362 times. I know that for a fact. But, you know, for all of us, they're old friends that we come back to. And that's one of the cool things about friendship, is we like spending time with those people who we value. And going back and spending time with a friend and sharing with them how you've grown and finding out how they've grown as a result of that is really interesting too. And it's interesting when you go back, there are things you discover about old friends because you've changed. So one of the measures that I have of my growth as a musician and an artist, assuming that I am growing as a musician and artist, is to go back and revisit old friends. And suddenly to say, how could I have missed that? Or why did I do that? But I forgive myself because I know that at the time that I did it, I was doing my very best. I was doing everything I could based upon what I knew, what experiences I'd had, what I'd listened to, what I'd read, who I knew. I did my best. And I was going to do my best again. I'll talk more about that with the lecture I do on the path of the artist as well. Okay. So in addition to that, developing a year-end, there are other things. And these are the things that people sometimes put at the top of their list. Anticipating potential problems in a score. And certainly I think we have to do that. And we have to be able to kind of decipher our way through it. We have to know those parts of the friendship that we have to negotiate. If somebody's, you know, got something that you have to kind of really be careful about, you deal with it. You develop teaching strategies. But only after you know the score. Because you can't make decisions about a lot of things, like balance, until you've made a decision about what color you want. And by color, I mean, if you've got trumpet and clarinet playing together, and they're maybe an octave, and they're both marked mezzo forte, what do you want? Let's say that the clarinet is yellow and the trumpet is blue. What shade of green is it that you desire? Would you like a darker green, where the trumpet's a little bit stronger, the clarinet's kind of riding on top of this? Or would you like a brighter color, where there's this underneath that's kind of hovering a little bit? Or do you want them, you know, equal, exactly, if possible? Do you want the trumpet to use vibrato or not? These are all decisions that you make the deeper you go into a score. You don't just make a decision, well, they need to play together and I want them to play at the same time. Great, let's go on. I mean, you start dealing with, the more your expectations are, the more you bring to everything that you do. Everything. What shape do I want it to be? It's marked mezzo forte. So I've got mezzo forte, right? And I've got soloistic mezzo forte, and I've got accompanimental mezzo forte. Anybody disagree with that? There is an accompanimental mezzo forte and there's a soloistic mezzo. We do this all the time. You've got the most important line. I know you're marked forte, bring it out. You guys are less important, you're marked forte, please, defer to this. So if we turn that on its side, that means that we've also got that with a mezzo forte too, don't we? So we can shape any line and still be within the dynamic. Any line, right? So we need to do that. That's also part of the artistic opportunity that you have. Expression, phrasing, style. Locating potential conducting problems is important if you've got potential conducting problems. And if you're overcoming bad habits in your conducting, you need to practice. And practicing with music is much better than practicing just on etudes, I find. I'd much rather have somebody, if they're working on just kind of getting kind of wrist and getting control on the tip of the stick, as opposed to conducting like this. I'd much rather than having them just do an etude, that they were actually imagining, let's say, the second movement. Right? So, I mean, the idea that music informs your practice too, and that helps get you more time with your friend, and also helps your skills get better. Practicing the language that might help you in Spain. I have to confess to you that when I gather information, I like to gather a lot of information. I gather information about the composer. I gather information about other compositions. I'm interested in their writings. There's a wonderful book by Samuel Morgenstern called Composers on Music. Whether any of the composers that you ever deal with are in that book or not, it doesn't matter. Because what you learn by reading that book is how composers deal with music and what they think about and how they communicate. It's interesting that Rameau in 1756 was talking about passion and expression and beauty in music. 1756. And Hindemith, Hindemith, we think of kind of Hindemith, was talking about the phantasmagoric sound. Dreams, based on dreams. I mean, how would we know that? Well, does that change your friendship? Yeah, this person's more complex than I thought. There's more to offer. Maybe I'll ask different questions. Maybe there's an opportunity here for me to learn more about this person in this piece. I have a process that I use when I deal with a score, and I recently did a thing down at Baylor University last year. Eric Wilson had me down, and they have a visiting professor thing that circulates around the university, and they had me down there for a week. And he had me do something I'd never been invited to do before. I found it really, really interesting. And the pressure was on. He had me down. I worked with his students, and I worked with the conducting students, and I worked in conducting class, and I worked with his graduate students, and they had a high school come in, and I worked with them. Anybody who moved, I worked with them. And then he set a 2-hour block aside, and he said, "This is going to be a time where I just want you to spend with the conducting faculty and the graduate TAs and conducting." And so he went into a room, and he didn't tell me anything about this at all, and he had gotten a set of scores, the same score for everyone. And he handed it out, and he said, "We want to watch you go through the initial process of score preparation. Just talk about what you're doing." It was a score I'd never seen before. We've got 2 hours. I said, "Well, we can begin, So I, just opened it up, and I started talking through, and we started getting into it. And I was saying, "Yeah, boy, this looks a lot like Dahl. I wonder if this person studied with Dahl, basing on an experience I had. And look at this, and this comes back here. I mean, just all the things that I do. But I find that process for me has evolved over the years. And obviously, the more friends I have, scores, the more questions I know to ask of new friends, scores. But here are some of the questions I ask. Well, first of all, this quote by Socrates, "Be slow to fall into friendship, but when thou art in, continue firm and constant. Continue to ask questions. Continue after it." I find that composers have various ways they try to communicate with me. And I'm aware of, first of all, something, obviously the program notes at the beginning, I read every single word. I mean every word. When a composer has to resort to a word, there's a reason for that, right? They want to make sure you understand, or they haven't been able to completely say it in the musical terms, and so they're seeking a way. And many times it has to do with the inspiration or some way to get you to meet them from where they began. Then there are words they deal with in the music. I mean, you take a word like Frank uses in Blue Shades, sultry. How many times have you gone to the ensemble and say, "Today we're going to work on sultry"? And Frank said the only reason he used that word is he didn't think he could write sexy in the score. So I don't think they would have liked that. Probably Margolis. Can't write sexy. Can't remember the word. But at any rate, I mean, there's ways of trying to communicate. So I look through, I'm really aware of kind of big things initially. So Holst, first suite in E flat. Gives you some ideas, right? Suite, E flat, those are kind of key words. And as you're going through and you see chaconne, Harvard Dictionary, then I'm looking at words and trying to imagine what's going to be allegro moderato. Let's see, is that more than moderato, or is it less allegro? But every time there's a word, I'm asking myself a question about it. I don't just gloss over it. I ask, and if I don't know the answer, I put a post-it note there, world's greatest invention, and I come back to it later. Because remember, I'm taking my friend with me on the airplane, any place I can. Okay, I mark everything. I mark all the dynamics, I mark all the accents, I mark all the tempi, I mark all the performance instructions, dolce, cantabile. And I don't just mark them so that there's a mark on them. I look at them and I mark them so that I know I've looked at them and I know that I've reflected upon them. So anytime I put a mark on a score, I've thought about that sound. And I mark everything that's in every part. So I don't do it with scores that I can get a lot out of right now. I used to do it, and with my conducting students in first semester conducting, I have them mark everything because they're just not used to doing it. But my scores end up looking something like this. Okay, this is a piece by George Wanner called Sparrows. That's a piece I'm conducting. So I got my friend with me, and in this you'll see all kinds of colors. Okay? And I got this. This is an original of mine. This is, Malco did this, and then also Otto Werner Müller. Anybody know Otto Werner Müller? Orchestral conductor. And I studied, I did graduate work at the University of Wisconsin. He was the orchestral conductor there at the time, and I did a score study class with him. And this guy, his kid's image of him is just this crazy man that sits around with colored pencils. I mean, that's because that's all he does is mark scores. But it really helped me, and so I have my own color coding for things. I think you need to find a way that works for you for score marking. But I would caution this. Don't conduct marks on your page. You make marks on the page to reveal the composer's intent and to understand the piece. You don't make marks just to conduct from. There's a difference there. So I have clean scores to some pieces that I marked up a lot too. And many times I'll use the clean scores in rehearsal even though I've marked, to death the scores that actually I'm making preparation on. And a lot of times I'll go back and I'll buy a new score for a piece that I've marked up a lot before, and I'll begin the whole process again and see how it is different for me this next time because hopefully I've grown and I might find new things tomorrow. But I mark everything. And as I'm marking, I'm asking questions, and that's a really important thing. The important thing is to ask the questions. Why is this forte here when this line was mezzo piano the first time? Why is there a cymbal crash here? Why are the timpani, who are on GC, now on AD? Maybe there's a harmonic change. Why is there a tempo change here? What is this ritardando preparing for, and how much ritardando is it? When it says pio mosso, how much pio and how much mosso? I mean, but everything is a question. It's like somebody says, a friend of yours saying, yeah, I was driving kind of fast. Well, how fast were you driving? Well, a little bit over the speed limit. Well, how far over the speed limit was it? Were you driving 90? Well, not quite 90. 85? I mean, you keep asking questions, right? Because you want to know the answer. And that's what the score is about, too. How much faster? How much slower? How much louder? How much softer? How much crescendo? How much diminuendo? How much stringendo? How much allegro? I mean, I'm constantly asking myself, and as I go back, it keeps changing. And it changes in me, and it changes in the relationship. And from that, I start getting a feeling about what all those things are about. And it starts developing a relationship because I've taken time to invest in my friend. And from that, I learn more about it. And then I can start making decisions because there are things that are being revealed to me. This is marked cantabile, and the last time it wasn't. Does that mean that it's not in a singing style the first time? Should it be less expressive, or is it this time that there's more? And if it's going to be more, how am I going to make more happen? How can I be more cantabile if I was cantabile the first time? Or should I just be dead the first time and not make it? You know, why is that different? And why is this dolce? Does this mean with vibrato? Where maybe the first time was without vibrato? Maybe, possibly. A bit stronger, a little bit more before. Is this forzando up? Or is it a whoa? What kind of accent is this? And if you ask Frank, I don't know if Frank talked about this. When Frank writes accents, they're not all the same. He can write the same accent. He drives me nuts. That accent in a lively piece of music is bum. That accent in a slow piece of music is that. It's a weighted note. And Frank says, you've got to take my accents in context. Ooh. Responsibility again, right? So everything I look at, it isn't just to say, well, there's an accent there. Because as soon as I see accent, I'm saying, what kind of an accent? Is this a weighted note? Is this a note that zings at the beginning? If I see it with bells, then that might give me a little idea of what kind of accent it might be. If there's an accent in the flute here, and down here I see bells struck at the same time, then that might be a clue, right? Because I'm comparing and I'm saying, bells have the same thing. I'm going to consider that as a possibility, that maybe that flute sound's going to try to match the bells, and there's going to be a decay on it. Because the bells can't sustain the note, and can't go, It's just not going to happen. So I start looking for things that are similar. I mark all indications of style, mood, programmatic reference. I look for what's new, and that's really important in any score, looking for what's new. Because if it's one way one time and something, or if there's something new that happens, you're going on, and suddenly the key change, or you're going to get a tempo change, you're going to get a grand pause, and suddenly everybody goes away. What's new there? I think that you need to ask that. The bottom line is, and I put it as the bottom line on this handout, and this goes back to the music that you choose and how you present it to your ensemble. My best friend is the one who brings out the best in me. Finding music that you can collaborate with. Finding music that gives you the opportunity to be the best artist you can be. Finding music that gives your ensemble the chance to grow in ways that stimulate their journey. And giving you a chance to make as much music as you can while still accommodating the developing needs of your ensemble. That's what we want. That's why Frank Tekeli is so terrific. Frank doesn't compromise his music making. He just works harder with young band pieces. And it's hard to compose a good piece. We had Leslie Bassett on our campus one time, and one of my graduate students asked him, Mr. Bassett, why is it that you don't write for young band? And his reply was, because I don't like hearing my music played badly. And that kind of upset my graduate students, but he was real honest. You know, he couldn't write a piece that was easy enough for people to play successfully. So he didn't do it, and that was probably a good idea. But for Frank, he can write good music that can still be played well, right? Anyway, questions. There's more ahead. You're kind of getting the Allan McMurray day today. And the path of the artist, when I talk about that, will reveal some of the things that I think help us on this journey, this left side journey here, yeah.
Can you just pass around the Schwanker score?
Oh, yeah.